What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. The time has come once again for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit. Is your GM hiding a really important plot device anywhere from MacGuffin to Red Herring to Shiny Sword and all the way back again? Do you need it? Do you want it? Are you vaguely curious about shiny things? Well, this episode is for you. Today, we're optimizing the Pathfinder playtest Rogue, who honestly might be one of the strongest martial classes in the Pathfinder playtest. If you guys are liking what you see, and remember, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and if there's anything you want to see optimized, throw it in the comments. We'll get there. But today, this episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit was brought to you in part by Mr. Josh King, who recently has upped his patronage from the $25 tier all the way up as high as it can go. My friend, you are amazing. You are beautiful. I'm very glad that in a world where I've moved far away from where I once lived, we can still speak and be friends and talk about our games and stuff together, and that you still feel that I'm worth your support. And on that note, guys, we are very close to reaching our next tier of $750 a month, where we're going to start putting out homebrew content for Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition. I'm not talking about like a crappy PDF with some bad grammar and really optimized things. Well, one of those is true. I'm talking about the full kit and caboodle, professionally put together and released with beautiful artwork, races, settings, classes, monsters, or should I say ancestries, because it will hit 2nd edition as well, for your playing pleasure. Our Patreon link, as always, is in the description if you'd like to help us get there. But for now, let's build us a rogue, shall we? So straight down to business on this one. This character is going to be in Pathfinder 1st edition, or older versions of Dungeons & Dragons, what we would call the Arcane Trickster. What that means is we will be archetyping into Wizard. We will have some arcane magic. We'll see straight away what the feat tax is like for a martial character to go into the spellcasting world and what kind of shenanigans we can get up to with it. Now, the reason I say the rogue is as strong as it is because the rogue has a super spooky ability that it gets right out the gate and that the rogue archetype does not hand out. It was a key part of optimization, at least in my opinion, in Pathfinder 1st edition, and it appears here again, Finesse Striker. When you attack with an agile or finesse one-handed melee weapon, you can add your dexterity modifier to damage instead of your strength modifier. In Pathfinder 1st edition, weapon finesse, slashing grace, the agile enchantment, effortless lace, and everything in between could cause us to ignore our strength score, have a real good dex score, and have dexterity to damage pretty reliably with most weapons. In a mechanical sense, what this means, and especially on a lower point buy, characters that like to be martial were a little less mad, which is not to say like they're monks or anything, but you wanted your strength to hit and you wanted your dexterity to dodge, have a ranged option, or, a reflex save. By using dexterity for damage, you can sink everything into dex, which means you have a good attack and damage, a good reflex save, a good armor class. It is super good. Now, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, it must be an agile or finesse one-handed melee weapon, which cuts down on what we can use severely. If nothing else, even if we fall behind just a little behind Johnny Greataxe and his 5d12s, we're going to have a better reflex save than he is. We'll have a better armor class. We'll have a better ranged option, which actually is super important for us. Of course, since we are rogues, we will be dealing sneak attack damage. If we strike a flat-footed creature with an agile or finesse melee weapon, an agile or finesse unarmed attack, or a ranged attack, we deal a d6 extra precision damage. If we use a thrown weapon, the weapon must also be agile or finesse, and as your rogue level increases, the damage dice goes up to 2d6 at 5th level, 3d6 at 11th level. At 17th level, we cap at 4d6. Now, obviously, this is a lot less than Pathfinder 1st edition, but I think in the meta, it comes out just fine. The reason I think this is because an enhancement bonus to a weapon also gives us extra d6, so it's not like we're gonna fall that far behind. One good way to look at it is if the Barbarian is doing, especially since strength and a half damage is gone for two-handed weapons, 5d12 plus, let's say, 6 at the end of the day. We end up doing something like 5d6 plus 6 plus 4d6. And that's not even everything we can do, but let's actually talk about how the build works instead of, hinting at it with sneaky things like that. Speaking of sneaky things, we will be choosing none other than, once again, the Goblin. There's a couple reasons why. First and foremost, the Goblin has dark vision, and our rogue almost always is going to end up being the party scout. Whether that means you're a little farther ahead in the dungeon checking for traps and things, or you're sneaking through warehouses at night to, make some pocket change. In either case, without dark vision, we can't, see in the dark where we will be hiding and where most of the encounters probably will take place, because most of the things in the book have, in fact, dark vision. And if we do something like light a torch, cast continual flame, cast light, etc., we're essentially slapping a giant kick-me sign on our chest. Not good. Second, this race does not have an ability flaw in its strength. Wisdom hurts a little bit too, and we do spend our free one to buy it off. But since we are not strength-based, since we have Finesse Striker, we're ignoring our strength score quite a bit. And the only problem with that is bulk can add up really fast in the playtest, and you can encumber yourself really, really easily. If you yourself are okay with beginning with 8 wisdom, that's fine. I just personally am choosing to buy it off because I don't want to get mind controlled, whether or not we eventually end up with master will saves. Backgrounds again are 100% up to you with 10 plus int. Jesus, that's a lot. Skill ranks per level with a skill feat every level. We are, of course, the skill monkey of the Pathfinder playtest, so you can pretty much do whatever you want with this guy so far as skills go. If you want to build into Scare to Death, it certainly works. We talked about that a little more on the Cleric video. If you want to go check that out, you'll learn how, you can go boo and everybody dies horribly. Halloween is, in fact, right around the corner. But I digress. Let's talk Ancestry feats. The Goblin, of course, does bring another couple really sweet things to the table. One of those things is its traditional weapon, the Dog Slicer. So out the gate, we're taking weapon familiarity for goblins. That gets us proficiency with a 1d6 finesse weapon. That's also agile. That's also got the Backstabber ability. Backstabber says, when you hit a flat-footed creature, and remember, they're flat-footed on the first round of combat, and we're doing our damnedest to make them flat-footed all the time anyway, the weapon deals 1 precision damage. That damage increases to 2 if the weapon is master, or 3 if it's legendary. That's not even our main form of attack, really, but it's still pretty strong, especially at low-level play, where that extra 1 damage might be, life or death. And here, next feat up is Very Sneaky. Very Sneaky lets us move 5 feet farther when we take the sneak action up to our speed. A stride up to half our speed plus 5 means we're moving a little faster in our normal method of movement, and also, when we critically succeed at stealth checks and then attack, our target remains flat-footed during the attack. The GM doesn't reveal the stealth check, of course, until you attack, but it is what it is. Still super good for us. And lastly, we are taking Burn It. This isn't nearly as good as Dangerous Sorcery is, but spells and alchemical items that deal fire damage get a bonus to damage equal to half the spell's level or the item's level, so strictly speaking better if the alchemist brews up some alchemist fires for us. And also, we definitely could be really good at crafting on this build if we wanted to be. Signature skills are gone now, and we have lots of skills. Also, it's a +1 conditional bonus to any persistent fire damage. Again, the bomb might not necessarily be our main mode of attack, but it's there. Why not? And of course, as if you haven't heard me say it enough, we're being adopted by gnomes, and we're taking Animal Accomplice and Animal Speaker. We have that extra feat, so there's no reason to not. Animal Accomplice, of course, grants us a familiar. Speaker, if that familiar has a burrow speed, we can talk to it, which cheats an ability on our familiar. We don't have to spend one of the 2 points to let it be able to talk to us. We can just have, like, a vole with flying and dark vision. Seems good. Maybe a little less inconspicuous than, like, the bird hiding in the tree, but we have spells we can cast on this thing anyway. And it still probably, as a tiny creature, can get places we can't as easily. Now, for our general feats, because we don't get it on our class, we are taking, in fact, shield proficiency, because shields are definitely the ring of protection of this meta. Yes, we get nimble dodge. Yes, we can apply nimble dodge to our reflex saves, but if that +2 isn't enough and we still get hit, and that's reasonable to assume sometimes that will happen, the ability to have that shield absorb some damage is always going to be good. That's damage we don't take, and a D8 hit dice and a con that's not super high means that if we get caught with our pants down, we might die with our pants down. No one wants that. I, in good faith as a YouTuber of the Pathfinder persuasion, can never tell you to not have a shield. In the Pathfinder playtest, it just seems wrong to not. Of course, our cleric build did use a greatsword, but it was specifically requested. Cleric of Gorum and shield cantrips exist, as well as a reaction that lets you block with your chest. So that seems pretty good as well. Anyway, the next feat does have to be weapon proficiency. A rogue is trained in all simple weapons, plus the hand crossbow, rapier, sap shortbow, and short sword. A rogue is not trained with shield bosses or shield spikes, and if we're going to have one, and often we'll need a hand free, that's probably our primary mode of attack. At least sometimes. We're going to do some shenanigans moving around where we can have other weapons out, because the boss isn't a finesse weapon, it's simply an agile weapon. So we can add our dex to damage, but we will lose a lot of to hit if we, try to brain somebody with the shield. But it's there, we might as well take it. We don't necessarily need to jam a skill feat in here, because once again, we have so many as a rogue. Gotta do it. At 11th level, we are adopted by gnomes to get Animal Accomplice and Speaker. At 15th level, it's Incredible Initiative, because Surprise Attack says on the first round of combat, creatures that haven't acted are flat-footed to us, so we need to go first. At 19th, it's Great Fortitude. We're expert in every other save out the gate, but fort. We can probably survive until this point, especially if we end up crafting like antitoxins and things, or stealing antitoxins and things. Both are perfectly acceptable, but why not pad it, right? And now the time has come for our class feats. This build changed like 4 times when I decided I was going to make a rogue and be super sneaky. At first we were an elf because I thought we could finesse an elven curve blade and get finesse striker, but one-handed melee weapon says we can't. We were a cleric for a while, but there's no invisibility on the divine spell list, so forgive us, Asmodeus. Instead, we are rolling the arcane trickster route. Our first class feat at level 1 is Bludgeoner. Bludgeoner states that you make brutal bludgeoning attacks that daze your foes. You can deal sneak attack damage with one-handed weapons of the club and mace groups, even if they don't have the agile or finesse trait, which, if we were strength-based, since we are taking martial weapon proficiency, means we could eventually have some big scary weapons. Also, there's nothing with the mace trait. There's clubs, but there's no maces. Confused. Paizo, clarification, please, if you see this, that'd be sweet. Anywho, when you strike with that weapon and crit, remember, they're often going to be at a -2 to us, you gain the following enhancement. The target is slowed 1 until the end of your next turn. And that means when they regain their actions at the start of their turn, they reduce their number of actions by 1. They have 2 actions in a round. In addition, they cannot ready actions, so that's still just as good. Well, maybe a little less, but in the meta, it's just as good as in the first edition meta, and we get it at level 1. Right out the gate. Now, of course, I can hear everyone now, but Tommy, you said that we were going to use a dog slicer. We are. The thing is, we're going to go dog slicer in one hand, light mace in the other. A light mace has finesse, so we can use our dex to hit and damage, and when we crit, we take an action away from them if we don't think we can crit, or with our second attack, we certainly can dog slicer in. We were very, very close to, instead of wizard, archetyping into fighter so we could grab double slice and do both. But since that's 1 strike for the purpose of sneak attack, it seems a little better to risk the -4, especially, eventually when we're true striking and are invisible. That's a spoiler. That's a spoiler. The versatility is super key, and at 2nd level, we're grabbing Quick Draw. In the playtest, Quick Draw costs 1 action. You draw a weapon with the interact action, then strike with the weapon you just drew. Because we are, in fact, going into the wizard dedication, often we will need 1 hand free. Quick Draw helps us cheat this. I'm a little unclear on whether or not we can do this, but as a GM, I think it's totally fair and very abusable, the spirit of min-maxing for fun and profit, to use Quick Draw to draw the shield that has the boss or spike on it, bash in, raise that shield. I'm not 100% sure if this works, again, but even if it doesn't, this is still a really good way to make sure that you have a hand free for casting and not, waste a bajillion actions. At 4th level, the feat we're taking is Poison Weapon. Now, remember, as the skill monkey, it's super easy to go into crafting, and if we want alchemical crafting, we can do it. We can do it pretty well. But for one action, if we're wielding a piercing or slashing weapon, and that dog slicer is, we apply poison to the weapon. Our next attack with that weapon before the end of our next turn gains the effect of that poison, but if we didn't have any poisons on us, we make a simple poison that deals 1d4 poison damage. You can only do that a number of times per day equal to your level, but that does help fill the gap that the reduced amount of dice from sneak attack is leaving us. Yes, it's not another d6. Yes, we can't powerful sneak to treat 1s and 2s as 3s like we used to be able to do, but if we're making drow poison or spider poison or any poison, whatever you want, we can deliver it. And poison is really, really good in this meta. I will not shut up about it. It's scary. It's really good. And we've got it right here. At level 6, we are taking that wizard dedication. That dedication requires an intelligence of 16. And this is a good time to talk about our starting ability scores. This character begins play with 10 strength, 18 dexterity, 12 con, 14 intelligence, 12 wisdom, 12 charisma. The final adjustment will be 12 strength, 22 dexterity, 18 constitution, 20 intelligence, 14 wisdom, 18 charisma. That wisdom headband might be the potent item you invest in. But remember, at that 5th level adjustment, to buff your intelligence by 2. And in return, you can cast spells like a wizard and gain a spell book, which contains 4 arcane cantrips of your choice. You gain access to the casting stuff. You can prepare 2 cantrips each day from those found in your book. You're trained in spell rolls and spell DCs. Our key spellcasting ability is intelligence, and we can use wands, scrolls, and staves, but only for spells of a spell level we can cast. Arcana used to become a signature skill. Signature skills are dead. Now, in my opinion, the four cantrips that we choose with this dedication are Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, Message, and Ray of Frost. As the rogue, we'll probably be touching things that we shouldn't be touching. This build doesn't take the trap finding stuff, but we're probably going to get to that trap first. Touching it with something other than our poor delicate little rogue hands is wise. Message lets us send a message back to the people who aren't sneaking behind us. Prestidigitation is just as useful as a familiar. And Ray of Frost makes for a pretty good ranged attack if we end up in open combat and can't sneak away. Our next 3 feats all come from this archetype. At level 8, we're taking Basic Wizard Spellcasting, which gives us 2 level 1 spells to our spellbook. We get 1 level 1 spell slot we can use to prep a level 1 spell. At level 6, remember, we're taking this at 8th, so we have this. We get the same thing, but with level 2 spells at 8th level. Same deal for 3rd. And it notes that the spell level for our cantrips and arcane powers is half our level rounded up. It's Arcane Breath at level 10, which lets us increase the spell slots we gain from the wizard archetype feats by 1 for each spell level other than our 2 highest. I'll break that down in a second. At level 12, it's Expert Wizard Spellcasting, in addition to granting us level 4 and eventually at level 14, level 5 spells. And I'm assuming at 16th, though the book does, I'm now noticing, say, at 8th level, add 2 level 6 spells to your spellbook. We're assuming at 16th level, 2 level 6, and a single slot. And then back Arcane Breath bumps it up. Get to that in a second. At 14th level, we're going to duck back to the Rogue, and we're going to take Improved Poison Weapon. That's an 8th level feat that says when we apply that simple poison, it's 2d4 extra poison damage instead of 1d4, and we don't waste the poison on a failed attack roll, but we still do on a critical failure. The damage dice keeps going up when we need to dog slice in. It's not a bad thing, it's actually pretty good. Assuming we enchant that dog slicer all the way, 5d6 plus 3 plus 6 from our super buff dexterity, plus 4d6 plus 2d4, I can live with that. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's a new meta, so you gotta compare it on a 1-to-1, right? Anywho, at 16th level, Sneak Savant. When we attempt a sneak action, we treat failures as successes. That makes the margin of error considerably shorter, super important for us. At 18th level, it's Master Casting, back into our wizard archetype. Master Casting says that we get 2 level 7 spells in our spellbook, but 1 spell slot, and at 20th level, we get 2 level 8 spells, but 1 slot. And now we'll break down exactly what that means now that I'm done vomiting mumbo jumbo at you. At the end of the day, we end up with 4 cantrips, 2 first level spells through 8th level spells, and we can cast 2 first, second, third, fourth, 5th, and 6th level spells in a day. 1 7th level spell, 1 8th level spell for the low cost of 4 feats. That's a little more than the casters have to spend, because I know that debate is still happening on whether or not the caster is taxed too hard feat-wise. But as a rogue, we have access to a lot of other things. And I was real close when I was talking about making a rogue video to making this video just straight up the first edition Magus, classically speaking, DEX int Shocking Grasp light weapon, go. It's basically the same amount of resources, and it's not hard to learn new arcane spells in the playtest. Specifically, we do that by diving into our skills under Arcana to learn an arcane spell. There's a bunch of stuff that goes on, but that's how you get spells. We can have just every spell in the game with enough downtime and enough gold, and we get pickpocketing stuff, so we'll probably have that gold. But as long as we have the time, we keep up. At 20th level, our final class feat at 20th level, as one might expect, is in fact Hidden Paragon. It's a reaction. Once per hour, we successfully use stealth to hide and become sensed, or use stealth to sneak and become unseen. We become invisible for a minute, even if we act in a hostile manner, and that 10 rounds may very well be enough for a whole combat. Not even see invisibility, glitter dust, or similar effects can reveal us, though sneak actions can still find us. But oops, we're real good at sneaking now. The only item we're really worried about today is the Greater Shadow Enchantment. Greater Shadow Rune is a +4 item bonus to stealth checks, which is real good. And also, the Onyx Panther is a trinket that lets us move our full speed when sneaking. A bunch of those doesn't go wrong for us at all. But now, let's wrap it up with talk of spells. Of course, we can get our hands on just a whole bunch of them, but there are certain spells that are just a lot better for what we're trying to do. These spells are a little less about targeting the bad guy and a little more about buffing us and making us cool. At level 1, Mage Armor and True Strike continue to shine forth. We can heighten that Mage Armor up to 8th. Eventually, we may get our hands on 10th level Bracers of Armor, which of course are better. True Strike definitely feels like a staple for this build though. 1 verbal casting, which may or may not, when you're invisible, give you away. Do it in the heat of combat, maybe they won't hear you. We attack with advantage, rolling twice and using the better result if they're flat-footed to us because we're attacking under a 4th level invisibility, which is the plan. They're flat-footed to us, we roll with advantage, we get closer to slowing them, and we apply sneak attack damage. We make ourselves also fumble-proof unless you like double 1 or like 1-2 against something real strong, but then it was meant to happen, I suppose. Anyway, at level 2, Spider Climb, and much more importantly, Invisibility are the routes we're taking. Spider Climb, of course, lets you climb up walls, and in lower levels, that might be super good for us before like a communal fly or something. Invisibility, of course, is 2 actions, range of touch, targeting 1 creature, and you become invisible for a minute or until dismissed, which makes you unseen to all creatures, though they can try to make you sensed instead. If the target acts in a hostile manner, the spell is dismissed after that hostile action, reaction, free action, or activity is completed, so we'd get 1 attack where sneak attack happens and are flat-footed, but heighten it to 4th, and the spell is not dismissed if the target acts in a hostile manner, a la Greater Invisibility. That's our bread and butter in combat. We have the shield in case we need it. The time may exist when we can't cast and we have to, block with it instead of our little goblin head. But by and large, that is the move. Go invisible, sneaky, stabby, sneak attacks, true strike, poison weapon attack seems pretty good to me. At level 3, it's haste and meld into stone. Now, haste isn't nearly as strong as it used to be because it targets only 1 creature until you heighten it to 7th, at which point it will target 5, but it'll target you, and that's what's important. You get the quick condition, and you can use that extra action for a strike and a stride. Real good if we're sneaking around invisible and we stab a dude and he starts trying to look for us, and we use that extra action to just get away from him, or, stab him again and finish him off. Meld into stone for 2 actions, and for 10 minutes, you find some stone, and you meld into it, essentially hiding in the wall for 10 minutes, or until you dismiss it. You can buff in there, you can cast invisibility in there, and then come out, but you can't do anything to the bad guys on the other side of the wall. And you can hear what's going on outside the stone, but basically that's just if you get caught in the dungeon, turn the corner, meld into stone in the wall, they'll never find you. At 4th level, most of the time, the primary spell is that heightened invisibility, but freedom of movement and dimension door are both also very good choices. Freedom of movement for 2 actions for a minute lets you ignore all effects that would entangle or hamper you. When you attempt to escape an effect that has you grappled, immobilized, or restrained, you automatically succeed, unless it's a magical effect of a higher level than your spell. But most of the time that probably gets you out of hazards, and if not, just dimension door out of there. We're not talking too much about skill feats, but you have a lot of them, and Catfall is definitely one you can take. So at higher levels, there's nothing saying you can't just dim door off a wall, into the sky, fall 5 million feet, land on the ground, take a bow, go invisible and hide. But anywho, for 2 actions, you instantly transport yourself and any items you're wearing and holding to a clear space within 60 feet, as long as you can see it. Bringing another creature, even if you're carrying it in like a bag of holding, and probably get one, because our strength is real low if we're going to be pickpocketing a bunch. The spell is lost. Heighten this bad boy up just by 1 level, and the range goes up to a mile, and you don't need to be able to see your destination as long as you've been there and know like relative distance and location. Anywho, at level 5, it's Pass Wall and Prying Eye. For 2 actions at spell level 5, touch a wall in an area 5 foot wide, 10 foot tall, 10 foot deep for 1 hour, becomes a visible tunnel through the wall, replacing the area you touched with empty space. Even a little bit of metal in the wall will prevent the spell from functioning. It doesn't reduce the integrity of the structure. No stone shape here. So the wall doesn't collapse even if it's load-bearing. When the spell ends, anyone inside is shunted to the nearest exit. Heighten it to 7, we can move it to 20 feet deep, and the entrance and exit appear normal. But mostly that's just if the party needs to get in somewhere or you need to get out real quick, tag the wall, cast Pass Wall, out you go. Prying Eye, or, Arcane Eye, as it was once called, takes 10 minutes to cast and lasts for up to 10 minutes, but creates an invisible floating eye, 1 inch in diameter, at a location you can see within 500 feet. It sees in all directions, and the first time you concentrate on the spell each round, you can move it 30 feet, seeing only things in front of you, or moving in 10 feet, seeing everything in all directions. There's no limit to how far that eye can move from you, but if you and the eye ever are on different planes of existence, the spell ends. You can seek through the eye as well, and sometimes you can't scout with your familiar, sometimes you can't scout with you. Prying Eye helps fill that void. Anywho, at level 6, we're taking Scrying and Mislead. Scrying, of course, as long as you have a piece of a dude, you can scry a dude. 10 minutes to cast, the range is planetary, and it targets 1 creature. It's like clairvoyance, except the image you receive is less precise. And instead of creating an eye in a set location, you instead create an eye that appears just above the target like it's a sim, right? You've clicked on it and it gets that green diamond, that's you. You can either choose the target by name or by touching one of its possessions or a fallen off piece of its body. If you haven't met the target in person, the DC is 2 lower, and if you're unaware of the target, the DC is 10 lower. If they pass their save, that of course being a will save, the spell fails and the target's bolstered. A critical success, the spell fails and the target is bolstered against scrying for a week, also getting a glimpse of you and learning your rough distance and direction, so you die horribly. Fail and the spell succeeds. Critically fail, that spell succeeds and the eye follows the target. So, you can find that guy and steal all his stuff. For 2 actions, concentration up to a minute, Mislead turns you invisible and creates an illusory duplicate of you. Concentrating on that spell means you can mentally dictate a course of action for that duplicate to follow. They act as though they had your full number of actions, though it can't actually affect anything, because, illusion. Both the invisibility and the duplicate remain as long as you concentrate. Per a 4th level invisibility spell, Mislead's invisibility is not ended when you shank a dude. The creature that determines the duplicate is an illusion doesn't know you're invisible, and one that can see that you're invisible doesn't necessarily know your duplicate's an illusion. Casting a spell, attacking, or otherwise interacting, pending a past deception check against the perception DCs of the observers, can convince people that it's the illusion that took the action. This, of course, doesn't fool anyone who knows it's an illusion. and it doesn't work if the attack obviously couldn't have happened, but that's still really strong. That's another thing you can play with, if nothing else, for a couple rounds. It might not be you getting stabbed at. Real good. Now, we're going to get more spells at higher levels. It's going to happen because it's real easy to do so, but there's definitely one level 7 spell and one level 8 spell I really like for this build. At level 7, 3 actions, it's Reverse Gravity. Out to 120 feet is the range. It's a 20-foot radius, 40-foot tall cylinder. For a minute, you flip gravity over. Creatures and objects that aren't secured to the ground, so like maybe grab something first, fall upward to the top of the area. A creature might be able to grab an edge to arrest its fall. If it falls past an appropriate edge, and if a creature falls against an object, it takes the amount of falling damage and lands on the surface. Once it reaches the top of that area, 40 feet, it floats just 40 feet in the air. The creature can move along the plane where the two forms of gravity meet, and creatures that levitate or fly can use those abilities to mitigate stuff. When the spell ends, all creatures and objects fall back down and get hurt again, but mostly this is just your panic button or your chaos button. Walk into a crowd, whoop, reverse gravity. Watch the fun happen. Watch the coin purses dump out onto the streets of Absalom. Take their gold, you're invisible. On the subject of invisibility, it's Disappearance at level 8 for 10 minutes and 2 actions that lets you become invisible and completely silent, defeating all forms of blind sense and blind sight, not true seeing or anything like that, but that's our capstone, which is gained at the same time as this. It's essentially just a little bit of pseudo assurance because we can only do our capstone sometimes again. Regardless, this build looks like a lot of fun to me. You should be able to get your sneak attack pretty much all the time with greater invisibility, not unlike in Pathfinder 1st edition. And when things start finding you, if the GM sideboards against this with Tremor Sense or Scent or what have you, you can still haste yourself and be a perfectly valid frontline fighter who's using a club to slow people. That's debuffs on level 1. That's so good. Action economy is still the king of the tabletop role-playing game, and if somebody has 2 actions instead of 3, and everybody has 3 actions in your party, sometimes 4 with haste, you get to do more things in a turn than they do. That adds up lightning fast. But what do you guys think? Does this build look fun? Does this rogue look fun? Do rogues really, do they seem real powerful with Finesse Striker to you guys in this playtest? What are you thinking? Do you think this is just as good a caster as a caster? Do you think our martial feats make us a better caster than the casters? Let me know in the comments. We'll keep that conversation going. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and again, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. The next episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, where we're gonna break down, I think, the Barbarian. I want to see if we can make that fatigue round a little survivable, and that drops next Saturday.